Right, so the year 2024 is generally an election year. We've seen some elections already happen, and there's a lot more set to come, with Ghana being a critical example. So imagine an election where votes are counted within hours and transparency is significantly enhanced. This was the case in Nigeria's recent 2023 elections, where the introduction of biometric voter accreditation aimed to curb voter fraud and expedite the voting process. However, despite these advancements, there were reports of system failures and disenfranchisement in certain areas. Similarly, in Kenya's 2017 elections, we saw the use of biometric voter registration, and it brought about increased accuracy and security. But it also faced its own set of challenges, including allegations of system tampering, difficulties in rural areas where access to technology was limited. And so, as Ghana gears up for its 2024 elections, conversations regarding technology and the electoral processes are up again and grabbing headlines. So in today's edition of This Week Africa, we'll be having an extensive conversation regarding the use of technology in elections, what we have seen happen in time past, what more needs to be done. So for us, enhancing our democracy as a continent is concerned. So this is going to be the focus of today's edition of This Week Africa. Let me welcome you once again to the program. My name is Efia Fusua. We have a special lineup of guests that we would be bringing onto the show to discuss this extensively. So you want to stay tuned just so you don't miss anything at all. We have a special editorial in this regard for you. Let's have that editorial. When we come back, I'll introduce my guests. Then the show will begin proper. You're welcome once again. Let's go in for that editorial now.
The use of technology in electoral processes has become a global trend in recent years. The aim is to improve the efficiency, transparency, and credibility of the electoral process. Many countries have started to adopt technology in their electoral processes. However, the use of technology in electoral processes raises important questions about universal suffrage and the people's freedom of choice and constitutional rights to exercise their democratic rights. The recent elections in Nigeria perhaps brought into focus the effectiveness or the disadvantages of using technology in elections. The increased speed and efficiency of vote counting and results transmission. This has significantly reduced the time taking to announce election results, thereby reducing tensions and anxieties among the electorate. Additionally, technology has enabled the creation of a voter register that is more accurate and secure, ensuring that only eligible voters can vote. For instance, Kenya's use of biometric voter registration and verification in the 2013 and 2017 elections significantly reduced incidents of voter fraud. Another success of technology in the electoral process is the increased participation of marginalized groups, particularly women and youth. With the use of technology, it has become easier to mobilize these groups, engage them in the electoral process, and create an environment where their voices can be heard. For example, in Nigeria, the Not Too Young to Run movement, which was largely driven by social media, led to the passage of a constitutional amendment lowering the age limit for contesting elections. However, the use of technology in the electoral process in Africa has not been without challenges. One of the major failures has been the manipulation of technology to rig elections. This has been witnessed in countries like Zimbabwe, where the biometric voter registration system was compromised, leading to the widespread irregularities in the 2018 presidential election. Similarly, in Uganda, the government blocked access to social media platforms during the 2016 elections, thereby limiting freedom of expression and the free flow of information. Another failure of technology in the electoral process in Africa is the exclusion of citizens who lack access to technology. This is particularly evident in rural areas where access to technology is limited and where people may not have the knowledge or skills to use it effectively. In countries like Nigeria and Kenya, for instance, there have been complaints that the use of technology in the electoral process has favored urban areas and more affluent citizens, leaving out rural communities. Universal suffrage is a fundamental principle of democracy, which means that every citizen of a country has the right to vote and participate in the electoral process. The use of technology in electoral processes can impact universal suffrage by excluding certain groups of people from the electoral process. For example, if the technology used in the electoral process is not accessible to all citizens, including those with disabilities, it can lead to the exclusion of these individuals from the electoral process. Therefore, the integration of technology in the electoral process must be done in a way that ensures universal suffrage. The use of technology in electoral processes can also affect people's freedom of choice. In a democratic society, citizens have the right to choose their leaders freely and without interference. However, if the technology used in the electoral process is not secure or reliable, it can lead to manipulation of the result, thereby undermining the people's freedom of choice. Therefore, the integration of technology in the electoral process must be done in a way that ensures the security and reliability of the process. Constitutional rights are the rights guaranteed to citizens by the Constitution of a country. The use of technology in the electoral process can affect constitutional rights by violating the principles of democracy and the rule of law. For example, if the technology used in the electoral process is not transparent or accountable, it can lead to a lack of trust in the process and the violation of constitutional rights. Therefore, the integration of technology in the electoral process must be done in a way that ensures transparency and accountability.
Right, so like I mentioned, we have a special lineup of guests for you. And as you saw in that editorial, and as I earlier mentioned, the conversation is going to be centered on technology, the digitization of our electoral processes as a continent. And I have been joined via Zoom by Divine SK Agbeti. Well, we're expecting Divine soon, but at the moment, I do have Evelyn Kwarteng. He's a head of programs and projects at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. Also joining us via Zoom is Kwesi Atuahene. He is the executive director of the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. Hello, lady and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on today's edition of This Week Africa.
Hello, thank you for having us, yeah.
Right.
And also is on the call.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us again. So, right, you mentioned Divine is on the call, right?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to be sure I heard that right. Okay, Divine, thank you so much for joining us as well. So, Divine is the head of advisory at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. So it's a power-packed house, you know. We have a power-packed team joining us via Zoom for today's edition. Of course, we're very privileged. So I'll begin with you, Evelyn. What would you say about your observations so far with regard to the introduction of technology so far as our electoral processes as a continent is concerned? How far have we come?
Thank you very much for the question, and a good afternoon to your viewers. Yeah, we live in a technologically enhanced society now, so I think it's just natural that we would see the role of technology in every facet of life. And post-COVID, we have seen that it's possible to do a lot of things with technology. So technology in our electoral system is not anything uncommon. However, we would think like just as how technology is changing the role of how we do things or the face of how we do things, we should also check how technology plays a role in our electoral system. And on the continent of Africa, we have seen the role of technology, particularly on the front of social media, making headway when we talk of elections. And then we've also seen how governments sometimes, enact very hostile laws to curb, misinformation or disinformation, or like generally to want to protect, I wouldn't call it protection, but would want to sort of manage the flow of elections. Yeah, so in terms of technology and voting, this is how it has been. Elsewhere outside of the continent, we've seen some countries actually make it possible for electoral e-voting, where you could be wherever you are and then you could vote online. So definitely it's a good conversation we are having now, and it's important that we see how African countries can also make use of the technology that we have.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Okay. So let me come to you, Kwesi. In Nigeria's election, we saw them use a biometric voter system. What's your observation with what we saw happen so far as the elections are concerned? And well, of course, it wasn't without its own set of challenges. But I would like to pick your thoughts, not just in Nigeria, but we've had a number of elections happen this year, 2024. There are a lot of elections happening here and there. What's your observation so far with regard to the employment of technology in these elections?
Well, thank you very much for having me. The internet generally in parts of the country has been low. That's how come my video is off. So, I mean, when I turn it on, you may not really be able to follow the audio that I'm putting out. But thank you for the question.
Right.
I think generally many countries on the African continent has made some substantial progress towards digitalizing our elections. The reason why a number of countries, Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Tanzania, have all been slow, paramount has been around trust and transparency concerns. A number of people feel that IT systems can potentially be manipulated and hacked, and therefore they've been slow. So about accepting the use of technology in elections. Some of the concerns have also been around digital literacy. So even though different parts of Nigeria, especially the capital and the former capital, like around Abuja, Lagos, and some parts of the states, have seen some progress, there are still substantial places in Nigeria and in Ghana that are yet to see literacy around digitalization. Okay. There have been concerns about infrastructure also as well. But generally, we must say that different parts of the continent have made progress. Going forward, I believe strongly that the advocacy on helping people to understand how information technology could change and actually influence the transparency of election is very important.
Right.
That information technology does not really seek to play a manipulative role for the government in power, but rather it can be used to check the transparency and clear the human errors. So there can be 100 or 99 close accuracy in results that comes out. I must also say that it is very important that elections that lies ahead, especially the 2024 election in the case of Ghana, is a destiny-deciding election because for the first time in the history of the country, we have a former president that is doing a comeback. Right. Subsequently, for the first time in many instances in the history of the MPP, they finally have a northern candidate that is leading their front, which happens to be Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia,
right,
who also happens to be the current vice president. So there are lots of uniqueness around the upcoming election, which makes it more tenacious. Transparency is very important because issues that can spring up can eventually erupt into something else that we all don't wish for. So that's just a bit about what I would say. Thank you very much for having me.
Right. Kwesi, I'll definitely come back to you. Let me come to you now, Divine. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Divine, let's talk the law now. What, in your opinion, are some of the legal principles that should guide the use of technology in electoral processes?
Thank you. To me, I believe that technology, as my colleague Kwesi mentioned, is here to speed up the process and also to ensure transparency and the integrity of the election. So, talk about the law, I believe that our government can actually enact laws or put up regulations around it, especially to govern the use of this technology, to be able to, so we can be able to use these systems to accurately and also to enhance the transparency and integrity of our processes. So I believe that there could be laws around, for example, the use of the BVMs, which are the biometric voter machines. And that is the only thing we have currently, for example, in Ghana. And the BVMs are only used to register and to identify and authenticate the voter to say this is this person who says he's this. And that is all it does. It doesn't actually help in the voting itself. And then, so there can be rules or regulations or even laws made around that to help guide the use of it. So we don't find it with individuals, and it can really be governed within the Electoral Commission. As we might have heard, some of those BVMs were stolen recently. And there were news across the country that they were found in individuals' homes to register some people in the middle of the night when those were not the specified timings for the registration, for example. And another thing I believe we can look at is the results transmissions, because Ghana is way behind when it comes to results transmissions because we don't have result transmission systems. So as much as we have the BVMs, they don't really enhance the process as it should because we usually have network issues. So there should actually be result transmission systems, and with this also, then there should be regulations and guidance around it in terms of the usage. And then also, we also need to think about the future, or what we call the emerging technology that can help in the process. For example, blockchain technology, which Sierra Leone used in 2018, and it was very efficient in their processes over there. So I believe that Ghana as a country, the gateway to Africa, for example, can actually begin to go beyond the BVMs and implement new technologies that can actually help to speed up the system, and also even electronic voting systems, which we call EVMs, should be used. Electronic voting machines should be used so that you don't have to now count the votes manually anymore. Once you vote, it automatically manipulate the totals or populate the totals. So then the people know how many votes is coming in. And then by the time you add the minor manual ones coming from some of the regions or some of the remote areas where they might not have gotten the network, then the system actually will go faster, and the country can actually announce elections on time and accurately. So to me, I believe this is how we should go about them.
Okay, right, Divine. I'm very happy you talk about rural areas. We've in time past seen the challenges people in rural areas are faced with when it comes to voting electronically, not just in Ghana, but then in other parts of the world as well. Now, moving forward, what do you think needs to be done, particularly for these people? You spoke about the use of the you mentioned something. I'll come back to it again, but you spoke about certain innovative measures, okay, that could be used so far as promoting voting electronically are concerned. What happens to those in the rural areas?
Thank you. I believe that governments across Africa need to begin to look at the infrastructure they have for the country. Right. I mean, we are in 21st century and every little child now plays with technology without being taught. Okay. So I believe the first thing is the electricity. That is key. If we can't have electricity even in every part of a country, then technically they are not able to even access technology properly. Okay. So it has to start with the infrastructure. Electricity must reach everyone. Okay. And then secondly, our telecommunication networks, especially those that supply the internet services. And I believe, for example, we are having systems such as the Skylinks that can reach everywhere. Our government needs to actually invest in things like this across countries. And when they're able to do that, and there is internet, there's continual electricity, then I believe that people will begin to accept technology. And once the government and maybe civil service organizations also add some training or education to it, or the awareness to it, that can really help speed up the process for every country within a continent.
Okay, right. Divine, I'll come back to you again. Let me go back to Evelyn now. Evelyn, Divine has spoken largely about voting electronically, putting in place the infrastructure to ensure that is successful. Now, we know the issues, or we all can relate to the issues people have with transparency, so far as elections are concerned. If a thing is going to be done electronically, how well will it deal with the perception or the issues or concerns people have regarding transparency so far as elections are concerned?
Okay, thank you very much. Right. Transparency doesn't happen in vacuum. Right. So before we talk of transparency, education is key. Okay. You know, we would first have to, like the NCC, for instance, can start a campaign, you know, where we will then educate the masses that, okay, we are migrating to this technology, and these are the things we have put in place. So we are going to do maybe A, B, C. So could we have, let's say, a verification mode? Could we be sure that before you vote, there's something personal about you, you know, like before you vote, then we are looking at, let's say, submitting your biometric data that is so peculiar to you. Then we know that, okay, I voted, my vote is counted. So one, I would go with education on the masses side. Two, education on the people who are going to use this technology. Right. You know, let's not just say that we want to vote electronically, but then the training was not done. You know, we should ensure that, or the government should ensure that the training is done, and also setting the minds of the masses at peace. We could publicly talk about this, you know, where the masses are assured that, okay, the training is ongoing, and then we know that, okay, they're going to be trained to know how to use this. Okay. Then on that day, we would ensure that there's also needs to be that sort of carrying the masses along, so we don't do something shady. We carry everybody along. Okay, this is how we're going to do. When we collate the votes, this is how we're going to transmit it. Of course, not showing the back end to the whole world, but so that if someone wants to log on, is there a system where I can see that, okay, these are the votes that are being counted? If I want to get to know the voting from a particular constituency, is there a dashboard anywhere online that I can check that, okay, 3,000 people voted, you know, for party A, party B, and then when the EC is counting, I can be sure that they will count 3,000, but they might not count 30,000. So for transparency is a big thing, and then there are steps we would need to take in order to achieve that transparency in elections.
Right, Evelyn, this sounds brilliant. Now, the concern again is how far or near are we from the implementing all of these things, sensitizing the people, putting in place the infrastructure? Do you foresee this happening anytime soon?
That's a tricky question, if I may say. But so there's this popular saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Okay.
So I mean, when we say that, it might be on one hand, it might be in the future, but on the other hand, too, what are the steps we can put in place? Setting up mass media campaigns, for digital literacy. It's not something that we would have to pack it to the future, because people use phones, people use technology anyway. You get it? So it's important that we would then start the mass media campaign. But on the part of EC, let's look at really what the EC is doing. Where are they in terms of technology? A few weeks ago, there was this news that the EC is using spreadsheets, to collect data. And it breaks my heart, because at this age and time, if the EC is using spreadsheets, then it looks like we have a long way to go. But that being said, that shouldn't mean that we would then just close that discussion. I believe that the government can then look at public-private partnerships, where they can say that, for instance, the EC is using Excel, and anything can happen to the Excel sheet. Someone just needs to have the link to this Excel sheet, and then we know that some things could be changed. So can we have the private sector and the government, the public sector coming together to see ways they could collaborate? Then we can think of, the government can look at the masses education, whilst the private sector can then come in to train the officials and everything. Then from there, I think we can, make some headway. But I agree with you, it's a journey, and we should all decide to then go on this journey. I think that's what I would say. Right.
Evelyn, I'll come back to you. Kwesi, let me come to you now. African countries spend so much money when it comes to elections. We spend heavily. Our budgets are this big when it comes to, our yearly elections. Let me put it that way. Now, in terms of employing technology to help cut down on cost, what is it that you expect to see so far as cutting down on costs is concerned that we are yet to do as a continent? We can use Ghana as an example.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity again. Cutting down costs, unfortunately, I think the cost factor around election doesn't seem to will be on the descending level anytime soon. It is likely to go up every now and then. But I'll use the opportunity to paint a very good picture for you to understand the dynamics of the cost structure also.
Right.
During the limited voter registration that happened in Ghana just 2 weeks ago, there were a few hitches that projectedly can tell you a good story of how the December 7, 2024 election would look like.
Okay.
All these components also have some cost factors. So paramount among them, there were logistical challenges, which means that some of the registration centers didn't have enough equipment. The biometric devices, you can go to an entire center that's supposed to take care of about 10,000 people, 5,000, 7,000 people projected, have 2-3 devices. There were also technical issues that biometric machines had technical glitches. Some of them had software malfunctions, others had connectivity issues. Some of them, even access to the registration centers were in remote places. So political parties now have to come in and do the transportation. All these components factors in how the election is supposed to turn out, the budget that goes into elections.
Right.
For me, I think that using technology is not even cheaper, because if you want an IT solution, the IT solution is expensive, but generally you would want the best in terms of accuracy, in terms of transparency, and in terms of trust in the public service as an electoral commission. However, the price you are likely to pay if you do not implement IT services and you do not build the foundation that IT services can run on, you would end up paying a much more higher cost, not in terms of finances, but in terms of the public losing trust in you, in terms of their loss of trust leading into other political interferences and tensions.
Right.
One of the dominant things you would also notice is that the general trainings that goes into officers that man polling stations and registration towards election is usually a bit low. What the Electoral Commission does is to rely on volunteers.
Right.
So the Electoral Commission, people will volunteer, then they will train them. The trainings they offer them, there are bigger questions that is begging. Is this kind of training enough to help them man up and do a good work?
Okay.
From our observation, during the limited registration, I observed that some of the officers, per no fault of theirs, ended up recording inaccurate data, and the persons need to come back and correct them.
Right.
Some of these inaccurate data collection eventually leads to other things that affect the integrity of the elections. Right. So I must say that the reality in Ghana is currently not the best. The biometric machines that were used for the limited voter registration were designed such that it opens up for the officers to use them at morning at 8 a.m. Then exactly by 5 p.m., it closes by itself.
Right.
Now, there are human factors in many environments, especially in rural areas where there's a long queue, where there are connectivity issues, where there are also software malfunctioning. What it means is that the officers now have to report to the constituency, it goes to regional, then it goes to national before the machine can be reset for people to register. I foresee such challenges.
Right.
These are the things that make the election more expensive. So having stable internet is very important. Making sure that the verification machines are running on stable internet is very important. Making sure that the systems, equipment are not just one or two that would get the queue very long, but they are available in their numbers to serve the community is very important. The election in Ghana is such that we have the government of Ghana supporting the budget of the elections, but also there are other entities that help in different fronts. I believe that we need to pay the price to make sure that we have transparency, we have accuracy. The cost of lowering the budgets against these backdrops is a bit more even expensive.
Right, Kwesi, we've in time past seen the Electoral Commission try to start a whole registration process again anytime the election is due. What would be your recommendation in resolving that?
Well, thank you very much again. I believe that we have gotten to the point where the data center we have in Ghana is emerging.
Okay.
So currently, every Ghanaian is being encouraged to have a Ghana card. The Ghana card is not just for identification purposes, but also to keep a formidable record of who is a Ghanaian, who is a foreigner, how old is the person, and that can translate into other fields.
Right.
The motive behind building new registration has been around the issues of trust.
Okay.
So in 2012, when the NDC made a transition into government, they believed that the registration that had existed during the ex-Wild President Kufuor's time favored the government then. When Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo took over from the NDC, even though he won the election by almost 1 million votes, still believe that the voter register that was used, which he won, was skewed towards that of the NDC.
Right.
So there are issues of trust. As we speak now, I would want to believe that should the NDC win the next election, there will be an attempt to also rewrite the data and rewrite the registration process. We need to put up an end to it so that we can have a formidable data and registration that we can add on to it. That also saves us some cost.
Right.
But generally, the data is such that because we have not invested so much in our public institutions, the distrust around the election is a bit higher. And because we have a bigger scope where people intentionally also create information and throw it into the public space with the intention of deceiving, also deepens the distrust people have in public institutions like the Electoral Commission, public institutions like the services.
Right. So that's Kwesi Atuahene. He is the executive director of the Africa Center for Digital Transformation, and we've been engaging Evelyn Kwarteng as well and Divine SK Agbeti. We will. Right. So let's go for a break. We'll be back shortly with more. Do stay. Welcome back. Hey, you're watching This Week Africa with me, Ifia. For Saturday, we are discussing the use of technology or the digitization of electoral processes, and we are focusing on the African continent. We do know that 2024 is an election year. We've seen some elections happen. There are more expected to happen. But question now remains, how best can African countries employ technology in ensuring the electoral processes are more free, fair, and very transparent? And I have been, we still have on Zoom. Today we are privileged. We have a power-packed house from the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. And we have Zoom, Evelyn Kwarteng. She is the head of programs and project at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. Kwesi Atuahene is the executive director, and Divine SK Agbeti is the head of advisory, also at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back from the break.
Thank you.
Right. So let me come to you, Divine. What is your idea? I want you to paint a picture of your idea of how an ideal or a fully technologically driven election day should be like. Paint a picture of how such a process should be like.
Thank you. In painting a picture of what I would like to see or how an ideal electronic or system would be like for me is, first of all, to have all areas within a country, including the remote areas, being able to vote. So the access to me is key. Therefore, I would wish everyone has an internet service to be able to go through the biometric verification processes.
Okay.
And secondly, I would want the EC to procure a lot more BVMs, or the biometric verification machines, so that you don't only send one or two to a polling station, you send at least a few more, and they should be properly charged. So there are no issues of maybe the BVMs have gone off, for example, or they were not charged, and so the people could not be verified, and this would cause delays. So the procurement of these BVMs, charging of them, and making sure all polling stations within the country have access to these BVMs, and therefore there are no issues. And then access to internet, reliable and sustainable internet is also key in this matter. Okay. Then, if they can add to it, then they should have an electronic or result transmission system where once every polling agent agrees to the result, that one is populated in the system, they all see it and sign electronically, and once they press go, it goes straight into the transmission system and no one can make any changes to that. And maybe this will also have copies, or you can scan electronically the pink sheets to it, so then the pink sheets would tally with what is inserted within the system. Therefore, by end of the voting day, we already know what the total is and what the percentages are looking like, before maybe where there are some issues would come in and then they can be resolved quickly. So that is how I would want an ideal electronic voting day to look like.
Right. So Divine, and I just remembered what you said regarding the use of the blockchain technology. That was what I was trying to recall. The use of the blockchain technology in voting processes. How does that look like?
All right. So a blockchain technology really helps to, it helps in all the process. It helps through the verification process, and it helps also to do the transmission of the election results. And it's a faster way of, let's say, getting an election done. And this requires technology training for the Electoral Commission, and also requires training also for those who will be conducting this. And to me, it means that we have to invest into this blockchain. It is sad, as my colleague Evelyn mentioned, it is sad. A few weeks ago, we heard the EC mention that they have transformed digitally, and they have moved from using a Coral Draw for projecting election results to an Excel sheet. And it's interesting that a country like Ghana only advanced from using Coral Draw to spreadsheets. When we have people designing applications within the country, they can actually even project mobile money transaction, daily transactions, and they can project it within their apps. And people are in Ghana who trained and use Power BI, for example, in their companies. They use Tableau in their companies. And there are things that can be done and developed. And we have applications or platforms such as Salesforce platforms, which can be used to develop something better that will suit the country's needs. But then we are still saying we have advanced to using spreadsheet. To me, it's like we are really backward currently. And I couldn't be proud anywhere to say I'm Ghanaian and we are using spreadsheets to project our results. Come on, in this 21st century, we're in 2024. So I believe that the government, the Electoral Commission, and also by the help of civil society groups, should be able to look at that and advance that system and make it a lot more efficient.
Right. Divine, thank you so much. Let me come to you, Evelyn. When it comes to digitizing electoral processes, what are some of the countries that come to mind? What are they doing differently? And how can we learn so far as implementing or changing our electoral processes are concerned?
Thank you very much. So, are we talking about on the African continent or outside of the African continent?
Globally. We can go global.
Okay. So we can begin with, for instance, there has been quite a number of countries that are using using digital stuff in their elections. And we can think of, for instance, Namibia. And this is from 2014. That's like 10 years ago when they used the EV system in their elections. We can also talk of Sierra Leone that used blockchain in 2018.
Right. 2018.
Yes.
Wow.
And also, yeah. So when we are talking of Africa, there are some countries that are using these technologies. I believe what they do differently is projecting a bit into the future, and then also seeing what other countries that are doing outside of the continent are doing. So they're not just saying that, oh, this is us, we want to. I mean, we would love to get there, but then we are not there, so we are just sort of doing whatever it is we want to do.
Okay.
So what we can do rightly as Ghanaians or as Ghana is looking at what are some of the things some countries have done. You know, what are some of the systems they put in place. So here we are looking at the infrastructure on one side. I think my colleagues mentioned of like developing our technical infrastructure on one side, and then on the other hand also educating the masses, as I mentioned previously, and then training the experts that would then the IT experts that would use this. So I think these are a few things that countries that are digitizing their voting system, these are a few tips and tricks that they are using, to ensure that they then transmit these the votes electronically.
Electronically, right. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but let me come to you, Kwesi. Evelyn, thank you so much for your submission. Right, so let me come to you, Kwesi. Kwesi, let's project a bit. Ghana is barely some months away from its main 2024 elections. Given elections are, as we always say, it's a process, okay? It's not an event. It's not a 1 day or a 2 day thing. It's a process. So what we are seeing now, what we are seeing the Electoral Commission do now, is finally going to translate into what we will see happen in December 2024. Given what you're seeing now, what projections can you make regarding some of the possibilities so far as our elections, so far as the 2024 elections in Ghana are concerned?
Well, thank you very much. I think that you've given me an opportunity to be a prophet for today. So I will say cautiously. Generally, the preparation towards the election from political parties, electoral commission, and the general public has been good. Quite a number of media agencies are putting out to psych the mind of people in different parts of the country toward the upcoming elections. I believe that the greatest of the responsibility also lies on the shoulders of the Electoral Commission to make sure that she is rallying every single person on the table and being transparent as much as she can.
Right.
There are a few issues that I believe that happened on different parts of the continent that is likely to be an issue come December 7th. So if we take some steps back on the African continent, in 2001, Uganda had issues in terms of their internet stability. In 2018, 2020, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, Chad, they all had issues with their internet connectivity. In Ghana as well, the last election, 2020, we had issues with internet connectivity on the election day. Part of which the government claim is their way of controlling misinformation, disinformation, to make sure that there is public order. But generally, there's an emergence of citizen journalism that also help in terms of shaping and reporting issues happening in different parts of the world. Mind you, we are going into 2024 against the backdrop of an election, the last election we had in 2020, where 8 people died. We had 2 people being shot in Techiman South. We had some of them being shot in Ablekuma, including some women. To date, the president of the Republic of Ghana is yet to make a comment on those deaths. So this is the reality against which the country is moving into the next election. So I believe that transparency from all fronts is key but also as a center that is focused towards digital transformation, we believe strongly that ensuring that the internet usage, ensuring that the equipment that you are using, the electronic equipment that you are using are safe. At what point in time would electoral officers would be able to have access to which data and when? Is it a case that they must operate from the polling centers when they move out to a certain station? When there is rainfall, what's the architecture like? Would they move to another place? How is it like? Where are they working? So all those dynamics that affect the usage of internet, that affect the usage of electronic gadgets, are things that we believe the Electoral Commission should take a critical notice of. I would also want to use your platform to say that our team, our cybersecurity lead, and our head of advisory has been able to develop a very good paper that focused on the potentials of cyber attack on the upcoming elections, which the team intends to roll out and build conversations around the cyber security issues that the Electoral Commission, political parties, and the general publics in Ghana should pay attention to ensure that the electoral integrity is upheld. But overall, as a center, we deeply wish the country well. We believe that this election is the baseline for the development of our country. And electoral participants is highly encouraged. Quite a number of people turned out to register during the last voter registration. Those who just turned 18, I must say, turned out to register, which is a good sign of citizen participatory in electoral processes. So we are optimistic. However, we would want to encourage everyone to also pay attention to what is evolving, and especially the Electoral Commission, the National Cybersecurity Authority, chiefs and political parties paying closer attention to the potentials of cyber attack. Hopefully, in the course of time, we would be presenting our paper. So I'm sure when the time comes, we'll arrange with you so that we can also have another discussion.
Certainly, Kwesi. Thank you so much. So that's Kwesi Atuahene. He is the Executive Director at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. We also joined via Zoom by Evelyn Kwarteng, Head of Programs and Projects at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation, and Divine S.K. Agbeti. He's a Head of Advisory at the Africa Center for Digital Transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of This Week Africa. We certainly would come back to you for more so far as the conversations around digitization of our elections are concerned. Thank you so much.